I live in Frontier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi there, welcome back.
We just moved there, actually.
Folks, we have got a very impressive panel, and we want to get started because I think you're really going to want to hear from these folks. We're going to hear from 5 business leaders around veterans issues and how those are being integrated and advanced inside their own companies. I'm Rich Homberg. I'm the president and CEO of Detroit Public Television. The topic of veterans, to me, reminds me a lot of 10 and 20 years ago when organizations came around to understand the importance of diversity and bringing new voices, new viewpoints, a much more diverse workforce into their organization. And the companies that really embraced it saw incredible benefits. New insights, new opportunities, new markets opened. The byproduct of diversity issues has driven many companies to great success. If you think today around veterans, it is much the same issue of people with unique needs, skills, opportunities that we need to bring into our organizations to improve our organizations as well, and also at the same time the added important element of honoring veterans and bringing the whole thing together. Making companies more diverse and inviting to veterans will improve our companies at every level. We're going to talk to 5 companies that are highly invested in the topic, starting with Seth Bodnar from GE Locomotive Operations. Seth's an executive of GP Locomotive Operations. He's been there since 2009. A very impressive track record. He's a former major in the U.S. Army, was the top ranked cadet in his graduating class at West Point, is a Rhodes Scholar, a Truman Scholar, and studied at Oxford. This is a busy man and very impressive. He's going to start and talk a little bit about GE's Get Skills to Work project.
Thanks, Rich. I appreciate it. You know, it's we have a double-edged, double whammy here for our group. We're, of course, it's always hard to talk during lunch, but boy, what a tough act to follow. Sorry, it's, I would never want to follow someone as impressive as that, and because you know we can't top him, so we're not even going to try. But you know, at first, I just want to say thank you to Governor Snyder, to the Detroit Chamber, to Masco, to all the organizations that came together today to make this event happen. You know, as a veteran, these types of events mean a lot. You know, we just celebrated Veterans Day on Monday, of course, and I know there's a lot of other veterans here in the room. I think I'm probably not alone. I enjoyed my free cup of coffee at Starbucks. I got a bowl of pasta at Olive Garden, even a donut at Krispy Kreme. So I had to work out a little bit longer yesterday. But these gestures, big like this one, and small like a free cup of coffee, mean a lot to veterans. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to the 50,000 plus men and women who are still serving today in Afghanistan in a very tough war that very infrequently makes the front page or the evening news. So the support that the American public has for our service members, current and former, is really special. But look, today my message is that veterans are not just people to be honored, thanked, revered. Veterans are people who we should recruit like heck to join our companies. You know, these are really, really talented, driven, committed people. You know, Sergeant is impressive. There's a lot of people like him out there in the military. This is an incredible talent pool. You know, I have the privilege to work for GE, and at GE, you know, we like to say, look, it's a good thing for the country to hire a veteran, but it's a great thing for our company. You know, we have over 10,000 veterans that work at GE. In fact, 1 out of 14 of our employees in the United States is a veteran. We have a very big veteran support network where we support our veterans that work at GE. We have an affinity group where veterans can talk to each other about their challenges and tips for succeeding in the company. You know, we have a program specifically targeted at junior officers leaving the military and helping them transition in GE. We recruit really across all ranks, and veterans do very well at GE. I'm personally a beneficiary of GE's value of what veterans bring to the workplace. In fact, last year in 2012, we actually committed to hire another 5,000 veterans over the next 5 years. So last year we hit 1,000, over 1,000. This year we're on track to do it again. So we're adding to our roles. We're doubling down here. And in fact, we're actually helping play a role in helping other employers see the value that veterans bring. We've been a chairman's level sponsor working with the U.S. Chamber and their Hire Our Heroes efforts. We've sponsored job fairs across the country. In fact, sent GE employees to 67 of those over the last year to help with resume building, interview skills, general coaching for the people who come to these job fairs. Really proud to be a part of a company and the focus on veterans. But this is something that makes sense for GE. Last year, though, early 2012, we had a couple realizations that made us want to even go deeper into the veteran with our veteran hiring efforts. And the first was that, look, job fairs are great and they're terrific events, but they're not enough. We have 1 million anticipated veterans coming back to the civilian, to the private sector over the next 5 years. And, comprehensive approach, industry-led, is needed. And such an approach, we thought, ought to have really 3 pillars. And the first being helping to identify and translate skills that veterans bring to the workplace. It's just a reality that for an employer who's never been in the military, it's hard maybe to understand the skills that a veteran brings. I understand it, many of us understand it, but I was an infantry officer and then a special forces officer. And I joked earlier this morning that when I was getting out, there weren't really many ads in the newspaper for gunslinger. These aren't necessarily skills that are directly translatable. So we have to help service members understand, both for employers and themselves. If people like me that joined the military at 18, it's hard to even understand what possibilities are out there in the civilian world. So I think there's a translation need. The second thing is an enhancement of skills. Again, I mentioned what I did in the military, and I had great intangible. I had leadership. You're going to get veterans with courage, determination, teamwork, all those intangibles you'd want in an employee. But the reality is, vets are probably going to need a little bit of training to make them a good fit for certain jobs in the private sector. Some won't, some will. And then the third was matching. Figuring out how to best match employers and veterans. And I've been pleased to see efforts discussed today around all 3 of those pillars. So that's encouraging. The second realization we had wasn't necessarily related to veterans, but it was an increasing awareness that we have a real problem with advanced manufacturing and the skills. We have what many call the skills gap. Our CEO and chairman, Jeff Immelt, chaired the Jobs Council for President Obama, and became clear during their discussions and some of the statistics that were cited is that we have over 600,000 jobs in advanced manufacturing today in the United States that can't be filled because of the lack of skills. Manufacturing Institute reports 82% of employers today have trouble finding employees with the necessary skills to meet the jobs they have. I'm sure some in this room have seen that problem. So as a major company in this country, we thought, boy, this is a problem that we ought to address. And what better population to try to do so than with veterans? And so we launched together with industry leaders. We had Alcoa, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, LinkedIn, Futures Inc., Tech Shop, some academic institutions. We had the Institute for Veterans and Military Affairs at Syracuse. We had the Atlantic Council, Gary Sinise Foundation. We got together and we created this program called Get Skills to Work. And the long and short of this is that we are trying to help veterans transition from the military to good, high-paying jobs in advanced manufacturing. And it's been a very successful program. We launched last October. We have, I think, 6 sites up and running or about to be running. We've placed over 4,000 veterans in jobs. We've touched over 13,000 and helped them in their job search. And our goal, we're really just getting started with this. Our goal is to hit 100,000 veterans by 2015. very, very talented individuals. We want to equip them with some additional skills and put them into a needed, in-demand, high-paying jobs. And so we're really driving toward that. I'm proud of it. And for those employers in the room today, I'd welcome you. And for those veterans watching today, getskillstowork.org. It's a great program. So I know many others in this room are working on similar things. And so, I'm proud to be a part of what GE's doing. I know the other companies on this panel are doing, equally outstanding efforts of their own, and it's a real pleasure as a veteran to see the outpouring of support. So I just want to say thanks again.
Thanks, Seth. Great job. Paul Demeter is a senior director of HR at Walmart, and he recently moved back to the Great Lakes region. He had been overseeing the Denver area in the Mountain States for Walmart in HR for a number of years. But prior to his experience with Walmart, he spent 27 years at Kmart right here in Southeast Michigan. Obviously, Walmart is our largest retailer and a huge advertiser. And you can see initiatives that a Walmart takes on are very substantial, and there's a number of things Walmart's made big statements on around health and food and outsourcing and sourcing of products. And obviously, veterans is a very important issue at Walmart. Tell us about why veterans, where it fits, and how your company's changing to.
Well, thank you, Rich, and I certainly agree with Seth. I mean, I don't know how we follow up on the program that we've had so far, and as a person in human resources, all I know is I certainly want to hire Staff Sergeant Junta. So we have to talk. But anyway, it has been just a phenomenal program. And on January 15th, our CEO, Bill Simon, who also is a veteran of the United States Navy, made an announcement. He actually made a challenge to everybody. And the challenge was that by Memorial Day, we wanted to kick off a Walmart Welcomes Veterans Home policy in our company. And it was quite a challenge. There was a lot to undertake as far as the recruiting and everything else. He gave us some specific goals. But the thing he said that I've never forgotten was, a person that fights for our country should never have to fight for a job. And Walmart, with over 4,000 stores in the United States and 1.2 million associates in the United States, there's no reason why we can't be offering our veterans jobs and positions. So he actually set a goal, and the goal was, within 5 years, we hire 100,000 veterans. And I'm thinking at the time, well, that's pretty daunting. That's quite a challenge. But then I think, well, we do have 1.2 million associates, and we're continuing to open stores and everything else. We can do that. Within 5 months, we'd already hired 20,000 of this year, and I'm very proud of that. And along with that promise, then he challenged us further. He said, come up with a program that will take care of the spouses of our veterans when they get deployed. And whether they get deployed in the United States or wherever, because we're in over 30 countries, he says, take care of them. And so we have the family policy and process in place too, where if a person does get deployed someplace else and their spouse is working at Walmart, they have a job. We find them a job. So it's exciting. It's really exciting to see the commitment. Seth talked about the value of recruiting from our veteran force, and it is amazing. I can think of so many stories in the last few years of veterans that I had a role in hiring, and what they bring, the leadership that is brought, the discipline, the integrity, the teamwork, all these things that have been mentioned, you can't buy that. And so it's something that we are definitely very committed for. And I encourage all companies to take a step back and to look at that. I've now been with Walmart for 6 years. I've been here in Michigan for all of 6 weeks. As I think about it, we can teach retail. That's not that hard. You can teach retail. But how do you teach leadership? I had a boss one time from PepsiCo say to me, you know what, Paul, I can teach you accounting, I can teach you economics, I can teach all these things in 3-4 years, but it takes a lifetime to learn leadership. And that's what it's about. And that's what we are committed to doing everything we can to give back to those that gave to us. And that's our story.
That's terrific. Thanks. Barry Milenkovic is the Chief Human Capital Officer at Amtrak, reporting directly to the CEO. He leads the company in HR and labor relations and related fields. He's also had experience with Fortune 500 companies that include Owens Corning, Holland America, Lilly, and Cummins, and has had experience in the private equity market. Talk about initiatives and guarantees and sort of goals inside of a company. You're going to talk a little bit about your 25% initiative.
Thank you, and certainly thank you to all our veterans, both active duty and not, for everything that you've done for the country. And that's a little bit about Amtrak's story and Amtrak's brand, because Amtrak is America's railroad. We firmly believe our mission, in part, is to be in service to America's servicemen and women. And a lot of that is driven by our CEO and president, Joseph Boardman, who himself is a Vietnam-era veteran. And Joe is just absolutely driven around mission. As a CEO, it's about the people, it's about service to our country, it's about running Amtrak like a business and effectively and efficiently as we can, but it's about our people and our customers. With that, Mr. Boardman took a stand to say that Amtrak will have 25% of all of our hires be veterans by 2015. Current run rate was around 14.6%. We roughly have about 16-17% of all 20,000 Amtrak employees as veterans as we speak, but we can do better. And Mr. Boardman is providing that inspirational leadership and vision to take us to that next step on behalf of our veterans and behalf of our country. So where are we at? We declared that in June of 2013. In August and September, our run rates are actually at 25% as we speak, but our journey's just begun. A lot of that falls to our talent acquisition team that is partnered with, wounded warriors, a variety of service-related groups that run events. We're pretty much running about 55 events in this calendar year. We've got a target to go to 100 events in fiscal year 14 relative to outreach. We're doing as much as we can at the grassroots level. We're trying to connect with reserve battalions across the United States, particularly if you're in rail. It's a good thing. On the other hand, Amtrak has so many more opportunities that vets may not think about. And I'll talk about that in a bit relative to our MOS kind of match system that we've got on our website, where you punch in your MOS and kind of directs you to the kind of careers you might find applicable within Amtrak. So an infantry officer or enlisted person would not necessarily just be known for kicking doors down, and that's often what we get in an interview, because we find veterans are so humble and they don't necessarily talk about what they've done holistically, and yet in an interview you've got to kind of self-market yourself. So we actually have our talent acquisition team working with veterans to be a little bit better prepared for behavioral-based interviews and talk about the skill sets around planning, logistics, the teamwork, safety, which is so important in the rail industry and to Mr. Boardman and our company as a value. Veterans bring so much of that inherently to our business. And so we want to do everything we can to make our story known, because we're in fact competing with other great companies for that same talent pool. But we think we have career opportunities that would be very interesting to veterans, both enlisted and at the officer level. I mentioned what we're doing from a talent acquisition standpoint. I mentioned Joe Boardman, a Vietnam vet, who's providing our leadership and inspiration. A lot of what he talks about is just not the mission, but the reliability, the judgment, the decision-making ability of veterans at all levels. I mentioned in the interviews, people will maybe narrowly focus in on their MOS, but you have to pull out, like, yeah, I was in charge of $5 million worth of equipment, or, I had this kind of responsibility. It just doesn't necessarily jump off the paper relative to their resume. So we want to really work hard to understand the veteran's mindset and their needs from their view, and what they want to do with their careers and how we can match that up. If I take a look as an personal example of Sergeant Manny Cabrera of the United States Marine Corps. Manny left the Marines in '95, joined Amtrak in '97. He left as a sergeant, was a helicopter door gunner crew chief, did other things relative to helicopter equipment maintenance. He joined Amtrak in '97. He started, on the railroad at the track level, became an equipment operator, went up the food chain, is now a director in our engineering organization. So great success story. You know, functionally, we also have the Amtrak Police Department, very esteemed group. It's often not necessarily a function found in many other companies, but we have APD, known nationally and actually globally for excellence in security. And they're doing interdictions, they're doing search and surveillance, they're doing drug trafficking, busts, you know, you name it, they're involved in it. This is plainclothes, this is undercover, certainly the K-9 units. And so the men and women of APD, you know, are totally committed to the veterans, many of whom are veterans themselves, and are so committed they actually travel with our talent acquisition specialists to events to talk specifically about their experience in Amtrak and their experience in transitioning from the military into Amtrak APD as an example. You know, we do other things as well. We have a locomotive, perhaps you've seen it, it's traveling the nation as we speak. This is an operating locomotive. It's pulling cars, it's pulling passengers, but it's decorated red, white, and blue. It's commemorating our veterans, and you know, so you know, another symbol. So when we cross the United States, you know, this is a living kind of monument, movable monument, if you will, in a tribute to American veterans everywhere. And so for us, you know, again, as Amtrak's notion of being in service to the company, that we're America's railroad, we want to be in service to veterans. We're hoping you can help get the word out to Amtrak around a career as well. In Michigan, we've hired 73 people in the last year here. 24% of those were veterans. We actually could have been over 25%, but a few folks unfortunately turned us down, but it's great news for another employer, I'm sure. So you know, we thank Michigan for the privilege of doing business and providing service here as well.
Thanks, Barry. That sounds terrific. Peter Pace joins us from Goldman Sachs. He's a Vice President of Investment Management with Goldman Sachs, where he's also involved as a leader in their Veterans Network. He's a former Marine captain. He has an MBA from the University of Chicago and an engineering degree from Northwestern. Peter's going to talk to us a little bit about why veterans in Goldman, you know, sort of a Wall Street firm adopting an important topic, but also how this has changed your recruitment process and your screening process and your progress along the way.
Sure, thank you. I'm going to echo something Seth said, which is this just gets progressively more difficult, so he had to follow the staff sergeant, and then everybody else is kind of taking my points from me as they talk, so I'm going to try and leave a little bit of meat on the bone for my colleague here to my left. I'm going to make my story a little bit more personal, because it's not often that I sit in a room and I get to tell people the story of the small company that is Goldman Sachs and some of the things that happen inside of our firm, and that might be a little bit different than when you hear a company hiring 100,000 veterans or 25% of their hires with a target. Just the nature of our business makes it a little bit of a different headcount problem for us. So I'm going to tell you my story, which is I got out of the Marine Corps in 2004 and I went to business school. I happened to attend a business school that Goldman already recruited at, and so I was a part of a process that is tried and true at Goldman. They find me in the pile and I go and interview. Touching on a couple of points, I showed up, I had been a Marine infantry officer, I'd been pretty good at my job, I went to a really good school, I did pretty well there, and I kind of sat there and I was like, look how great I am, you should definitely hire me. And I was not prepared for the expectation of the effort I was to put forward telling people how great I was. It was countercultural. I got feedback early in the process that I needed to be more enthusiastic, and I was like, look, if I get this job, I'm going to kill it here. Look, because there's this funny thing. So this is in preparation for today's conversation. You know, I printed up something that's very important inside of my company. This is our 14 business principles. All right, so these were crafted by veterans at Goldman Sachs, a guy named John Whitehead. He's a kind of a legend inside of our organization. He's the chesty puller inside of Goldman. And so, you know, this is a guy who sat down over a weekend in 1974 and wrote down what he thought it was, what being Goldman Sachs should mean, what it meant to be an employee of Goldman Sachs, what the firm wanted to represent itself as, how they wanted to conduct themselves. These are principles that will resonate with every military member, but if you run a business, if you started a business, if you have a leadership role in a business, you set a tone. You may not have this piece of paper, you may be one line, and if you don't have like a placard by your front door or a similar mission statement, leave here, go make one. Because to the staff sergeant's comment, and to something else that's been alluded to here, the veterans are not, they don't need your charity. They want your challenge. They want a mission. Give them a mission, they'll get it done. The staff sergeant said this a couple of different ways, all of which resonated with me, which is things get hard. Yeah, no problem, I can work through difficulty. Things are gonna be unexpected. Yeah, I get that. As long as I understand the context of the mission, I can carry forward and without, I won't always call you for instructions. I'm gonna try and continue our goals here collectively now in Company X. And fundamentally, the concept that at age 21, we take people and give them jobs and responsibility and accountability and the ability to do real good. We give them really important jobs and expect them to do strategic things in our name. As a captain, I have specialists and sergeants out doing stuff that I can't necessarily control, but it can have a major strategic impact. That kind of responsibility doesn't exist in the civilian world. How many 21-year-olds in your company can really screw stuff up? Like if they put their mind to it, they can probably do something weird. But like most of the time, there's somebody watching that young man or young woman to make sure they get a piece of the pie, but somebody's going to double check their work. He doesn't have that luxury. I didn't have that luxury. Seth didn't have the luxury. That's something that kind of breeds an inherent accountability and responsibility that's really difficult to replicate. So now, if I say that, and I happen to work in an industry that, let's say, recently has been challenged, hypothetically. In a place where the concept of business principle number one, by the way, is our clients come first. This is who we are at Goldman Sachs. It doesn't necessarily translate if you don't know us, but the mission comes first. The mission is our clients, serve your mission. That if you go through these 14, which I won't, I promise, they tie one for one to the leadership principles that I learned in the Marine Corps. The little JJ did tie buckle analogy, like they're all here. And it's culturally a very, very easy fit. So I show up and I'm interviewing. I'm like, look, guys, I'm your man. Guys like me, you should want more of me around. They were interviewing for skills and hoping for leadership. I was bringing leadership, and I needed to kind of burnish my finance skills. I had 2 years at a really, really good institution, but I had a lot to learn. But I knew that I had the capacity, that I was flexible enough that I could bring all these things to bear. Anyway, so that's about me. Fast forward a couple of years to 2011, we launched an initiative inside the firm whereby we formalized our veterans network. It used to be, there were about 250 of us who kind of self-identify as veterans inside the firm, representative of the population. It's about 1% of the firm. And it existed as a listserv, and every Veterans Day you'd get a, hey, let's go get a beer, and every Marine Corps birthday, then everybody would definitely show up for a beer, because that's how we roll. And it was a good thing, but it wasn't a pillar inside of the firm, although it was kind of understood. We were underrepresented as mathematically in the firm, but we were way overrepresented in the leadership. Managing directors and partners, responsibility roles, we were definitely overrepresented. So in 2011, two things happened out of order, and I'll leave some of this for question and answer. But we announced an initiative where we were going to support military veteran organizations. That Lloyd came out and made a commitment to do $20 million in donations, which seems like a lot of money. And right after that, we stood up this formal initiative inside the firm, and it was basically all of us now officially had a place to go on our website. It was like, I'm a veteran, and like we could all go to that website. And that was, honestly, that's what it was on day one. I, being one of the relatively more tenured people at the time, became head of our outreach pillar. So there were pillars, there was communication, recruiting, and outreach. And outreach was everything from keeping the dialogue in the firm going, like continuing to educate our peers who did not share our background but were interested in our causes, to peers who were supporting military organizations and wanted the firm to support in a more material way, to once anybody heard we were giving away money, they all kind of wanted some money. So they all got my phone number, and I, in addition to having my day job, was in the job of trying to figure out how Goldman gives money away, and the answer is not very effectively, as it turns out. So we went through a big learning curve, and I'll pause there and kind of set the table for future conversation on that. But it is something that if you have an organization like this, we learned a lot of stuff, and we had the benefit of being relatively young in an official capacity and relatively small in a number of people capacity. So we've been moving pretty quick over the last couple of years.
That's great. Thanks. Great start. David Ritter joins us. David is a project manager with AT&T, and one time he manages about a dozen different projects, but he's also very involved with the AT&T veterans issue. After President Obama announced his Joining Forces project in March 2013, the company's gotten very active in the issue, and David's been involved as the acting president of the AT&T Veterans of Michigan and on the National Board of AT&T Veterans. Perhaps equally, or certainly equally important, is that he's a former captain in the U.S. Air Force. During his 10 years, 12 years in the Air Force, he was spent full-time or temporary time in 27 out of 50 states and 5 foreign countries. Just amazing when you think about that. I'm always struck by the temporary assignments and what we do to individuals' lives in order to make a military work. He joins us from AT&T, an important company here in our state, to talk about their commitment to veterans.
Thanks very much, Rich. And you did leave me some meat in the bone, so thanks very much.
Team player.
But to echo what my fellow panelists are saying, and Rich's mention of our Joining Forces initiative, where AT&T is joined with Michelle Obama's program, which is now shared by many companies across the United States. It's interesting to note that I hear this throughout the panel and throughout the day. We have direct support from our leadership. Our CEO, Randall Stevenson, although not a veteran, is 110% behind what we do in our group of AT&T veterans, which, by the way, is not my day job. It's a nonprofit organization supporting veterans. Our motto is supporting those who've served our country. For the Joining Forces program, and he's kind of co-opted the AT&T Veterans Group into it, and we're about 7,000 strong through the company. We made an announcement through Joining Forces that we would hire 5,000 veterans over the next 5 years. Well, apparently what happened, we set our goals really low. Just last week was mentioned, was announced formally, we've already hit the 3,600 mark on hiring 5,000 veterans. So we're doubling down, we're hiring 10,000 veterans in the next 5 years. So that's, it's a great tribute to what we can do as a company. Now, AT&T certainly has a long history of veterans. In fact, when I was just sitting here thinking about it in the conversations I had before the panel, my father served during the Korean War era. He did serve in Korea, served in Germany, and he came out. He started as a lineman, a splicer technician for AT&T. My mom kind of did it opposite when she was in high school in Beaver Falls, Pennsylvania. After school, she would go over and work as a operator in the Beaver Falls switchboard for the old phone company. She went in the military, met my dad, so I've got military history in my family. In fact, I am just surrounded by veterans in my family. And I never thought I would join the phone company per se, Ameritech AT&T. And here I am 17 years later, joining as a result of a military hiring program that was initiated in the 1990s when there was a drawdown in the military. It's just a phenomenal experience that we've had. And again, echoing what we've heard here today, not only through the panelists, but by the presentations, the skills that veterans bring and the leadership. And we're not just talking entry-level jobs. In fact, with the 5,000 commitment, it's now 10,000, just looking at some stats for that, only 55% are we bringing in, say, at the technician level, which is a really good skill match for the technology skills that the military has coming out for our technicians, especially you all probably customers, or very many, hopefully you're customers. But we're just going gangbusters. We're also focusing on the leadership skills that the senior NCOs bring to us, as well as the company grade officers like myself. The senior grade officers as well. We actually have programs to try to bring them in directly into not just a first level job, but to a higher level. Very difficult for some companies who sometimes feel that you need to prove your worth by starting at the bottom and working from a broom pusher all the way to the top. Not necessarily true with AT&T, but other companies can do it. We certainly have a lot of resources and as many thousands of people we have worldwide. But I am here today to tell you that small companies, no matter how small, can do the same thing. You can make a commitment. And with me, it's a passion. I had an interest in doing this and serving with a group that recognized the talents and backgrounds of veterans in the company before 9/11 occurred and with more urgency after it occurred. This veterans group kind of started as a groundswell organization, and it was formed, and to echo what Sal was saying, it formed in Connecticut 30 years ago this past April as a newsletter of veterans, Vietnam veterans, talking to each other and getting a feel for what they were dealing with in the workforce and personally. And it grew, and we went national in 2006, where we have now 30 chapters across 50 states and 7,000 members, and started as just a dialogue with veterans who felt very much not appreciated and needed. More socially, certainly in the workforce, they were hired. But the AT&T Veterans Group, along with a company, provides many tools for the skills translations. We have an MOS site, I hear that mentioned as well. And we also have a mentoring program, which is absolutely phenomenal. Peer-to-peer talks. You know, if you have somebody interviewing, and if they might not have a military background familiar with what's going on there, they might not know how those skills would translate. We have, before people even hire on, we have a place where you can go online, hire up, or sign up with ATT Jobs, and get a peer connection with somebody like myself who might be able to give some advice. Hey, this was your MOS or AFSC, or what your job title was. I can probably tell you where you might have an opportunity to work. And if it's not with AT&T, maybe some other position in another company. So that's very powerful when you look at what we have of that. And again, this is all volunteer work that the AT&T Veterans does for it. But we synergize with what Mr. Stevenson is doing at the top level. And when he sets the tone for that, folks really listen, because he has made that commitment to give jobs, or not give jobs, but to make sure that the right folks are getting in. And we don't give jobs just to anybody walking off the street. There is a process that you have to go through in HR and all that. I talked earlier today about the challenges that a lot of our service members have coming out, not just medically, possibly mentally, but we want to make sure that there's a good fit. But those leadership skills and those technical skills, working with teams, and as I heard it mentioned today, you give these folks a mission, a clear goal, you just stand back and watch them run with it. And that's how AT&T is still learning. We're still perfecting this. Never be perfect. It's a road and a journey to get there. But we definitely want to share that experience with other companies. Actually, some are already using us as a benchmark to come in and talk to us about our veterans programs and what we do. So great opportunities here, and I'm pleased to share those with you today. Thank you.
Great, thanks much. I guess I'm struck as a civilian. There seem to be sort of two tracks in America, folks who understand the military and veterans and folks who don't. I grew up in a military family. My father worked for McGuire Air Force Base. My mother was in the Navy, and then you kind of move away from that. Lots of career soldiers in my family, but you move away from that. I've gotten broadcasting. And a couple of years ago, I was invited to spend a week with the military, and it was total immersion, 24/7, and it was a fascinating experience, but it really took me back and reminded me of how far this gap is sometimes between these two folks. Now I live in a town where there are very few folks who have service experience. How do you, if you were talking to a CEO at a company and you said, these folks don't get it, these folks don't understand the importance of this issue or the opportunity, what would you say to them? Peter.
I'll grab a piece of that, and I'll bring a military concept into a civilian construct, which is, in the Marine Corps, there's an officer who's in charge of a unit, and he always has a senior enlisted advisor next to him, right? It's always a team. And that senior enlisted advisor has a lot of jobs, but one of those key jobs is to really have the connection to the men, and have oh, by the way, as a lieutenant, teach you everything you need to know so you don't get anybody hurt. B, oh, by the way, here's what's going on inside the unit. The concept of having somebody in your organization who is energized about and tasked with helping those who may not have the same level of understand a military resume when it comes across your door, understand why Marines are going to be weird around the 10th of November every single year, you know, why Veterans Day is processed. But having somebody in your organization, if not officially tasked with and paid to do that, having a volunteers who will say, look, if any resume that comes across, shoot it my way and I'll route it around the network. I see that one of the big learning curves for us was, we want to hire more veterans. Okay, great, but we don't hire a lot of people. And the person who saw a resume screen out of the University of whatever for an analyst position, or out of top business school for an associate position, didn't necessarily have didn't have the knowledge to process what they were reading, because, as veterans know, there are understated, amazingly qualified officers and enlisted men who come out who just say, hey, look, I was a staff sergeant and I was a platoon sergeant and I did X deployments and I did my job and that's great. And then there'll be another person who will be slightly more aggressive in positioning how, this will resonate with some people, I was a platoon commander for like 3 months and then they moved me over to the operations division to make sure that I could really make sure all the paperwork was going out. Like, so some of us, that's a big blinking red light. We're like, whoa, why'd they take that guy out of this role and put him in that one? But to a civilian, it could read very, very differently. And so understanding the subtleties and context and knowing what questions to ask next became a really important part of our process because we were missing out on these amazing candidates. Amazing candidates. And I'd see them afterwards like, why don't we get this guy? Why do we have this guy? Or why is she not here? And so we actually formalized that process. If you see United States Naval Academy, West Point, or Sergeant, Sniper Platoon, 3rd Battalion, 1st Marines, that gets routed to our group. We get eyes on it, and you get somebody to spend some time digging into that. And it just has really empowered everybody in the organization to be more thoughtful. Oh, by the way, in doing that, that forms connections within our own organization. So not everybody's going to serve, and that's fine. And not everybody's going to know everybody that served, and that's fine too. That's just math. But we're finding lots of ways to form those connections. So if there's these verticals, right? Like there's privates all the way to generals, and there's janitors all the way to CEOs. You don't need to be doing this. We should be bringing the lines closer together, kind of soup to nuts, and making sure that there's some connectivity between the communities, because as time passes, people move up both of those chains. And the more of those relationships you can form, such that when people at this table come time for them to get out, they've met somebody along the way who has taken a different path. And I get a phone call from somebody here saying, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. And I'm like, I don't know anything about that, but my buddy from business school is, and here's his name and number, and go call. Forming those networks is really the most powerful thing that's happened for us. And it started with that really key insight, which is having people understand that they might not have the tools they need to understand what they're looking at.
And I'd second that. I think I agree with Pete that attracting and understanding what veterans bring is really important. And I have HR experts up here, but if you think of attract, develop, retain, I think the other two components are also important. Recognizing that veterans bring a lot to the table and have a little bit of patience to develop them within your organization, and then really think about the structures you set up to retain these individuals. We've heard each of our panelists, I think, discuss the networks that have developed kind of on their own, right? Military people are joiners, right? Sorry not to mention it, right? You want to be with people, right? I don't want to jump out of a plane myself. I was the same way. I jumped out because, well, it'll be a big news story if we all die on this thing. So, I feel a little bit safer knowing it's a bigger deal with other people. So we're joiners, right? And GE's Veterans Network is great connective tissues for veterans that are in the company. You come back, I thought I was a big bad Green Beret. You join a private company, and I'm looking at marketing materials for small reciprocating engines. And it's interesting stuff, but sometimes you have to step back and you say, oh boy, I miss some of the stuff from the military. And it's really important to have people around, whether it's in Afghanistan, somebody to come by, pick you up and say, hey man, I see you're thinking about this. Let me explain this to you. Let me help you through. Let me show you some paths. Let me work with you a little bit. It makes a world of difference in both making those veterans more effective in your organization and making them more likely to stick around.
Great. How about from the HR point of view?
No, well said. I think, as we look at it, there are certain things from an HR standpoint that make people stand out. And I think about a recent hire that we did, and the person, what made this person stand out as I went through it was, okay, graduate from West Point, had served overseas, certainly understood different cultural aspects of the job. And yeah, the learning curve, maybe it was a little bit longer. Probably was not the most qualified person to step into the job, but what really made him appealing to us was simply the life experiences that he had, and realizing that he understands cultural differences in a time when it's very important, and that he would quickly be able to pick up the other areas that would make him successful, which he did. And he's just a phenomenal leader today.
That's great. Inside of our businesses, there's a culture in the employees at the ground level, what gets said at the water cooler, the atmosphere you create. What should companies think about as they're trying to take that and socialize it throughout their culture, Barry?
Yeah, I think the proof's in the pudding. So what we're doing is assigning people to the roles and leadership roles. And if you want to step up and you're a veteran, we want to showcase that. I mean, 2 quick examples just within the human capital team within Amtrak. We have Paul Phil and Brian Riley, both retired military. Paul's developing and taking our leadership development programs to the next level. Brian's an interesting story because, I think sometimes from a HR perspective, if you're not in tune with the military, you hear military, you might just think combat arms. And while that's true, there's IT, there's finance, there's everything, medical, I mean, you've got it all. And so Brian's story was he was an accountant. And I was looking to take our budgeting process to the next level. Now, he's also working in human capital IT operations. His day job was not helping me with the budget, but mission-driven, give me a goal, and he has been an absolute rock star in applying what he learned in the military to the real-world need we've got in business today. And, and that story gets out, and, it's a credit to the veterans.
David, you made a big transition in your life from the military world to a big company. What do veterans need to know? How do we inform them on how they move into this very different world?
One of the best things to do, Rich, for transition purposes, there was a whole, actually, a military program it's called TAP, Transition Assistance Program. But we also have, in our company, we have tools and abilities of the skill sets, as we mentioned before. It's transition. It's important for military members to remember that not everything translates 100% into the civilian workforce. But the background they get, usually through whatever service or whatever experience they had, usually applies in some way, whether it be in leadership or working on teams. All of those different kind of things, it might not mesh up perfectly, but the more that you find out and ask questions about and get that, the mentorship programs that we have a fantastic program of mentoring circles of high, from our highest ranking leaders in the company all the way down to first level management, as well as our union workforce, to assist with making sure that those skills translate and people can ease into those jobs a little bit more readily. One thing comes to mind is we mentioned the Watercooler talk and socializing in networks. The folks who join AT&T Veterans are all volunteers, and we find that through these different support groups, mostly it's having a passion for doing it. And it's a volunteer thing. You usually don't do it unless you have a strong desire or will to succeed in doing something. And we have a lot of those opportunities where I mentioned the peer-to-peer mentoring. But Randall Stevenson himself, again, it's so important that you set the example, not just by having these programs say we do this or we're going to do this. Randall Stevenson himself, he meets with a high school, they have a high school mentoring program. He sits down with them a couple times a month, and it's not, in fact, he keeps very quiet about it, but the word does get out. And you set that tone at the highest level that it's okay to be making sure that you understand, because there are some preconceived notions of everybody, jumping out of airplanes, perfectly good ones, by the way. We don't jump out of perfectly good airplanes in the Air Force unless we have to. But they're going to come, that they're going to be fully loaded and ready for bear. And it's sometimes a perception that in the industry side that we might have, it makes people stand back a little bit. But once they start telling your stories and having those stories apply to what you're doing, like, oh, well, that matches in great with what we're doing here in our sales department, in our teams, and reaching these goals, or in our technology side, where we're trying to do this, or producing, or launching a new product. It's absolutely, the synergies that can come out of that are manyfold what has gone into it originally.
There's some terrific companies today represented here that are supporting this effort. Masco, Meyer, AT&T, wonderful companies. There are two companies that are going to leave here with specific assignments or looking to help. One is the Chamber of Commerce, and the other is obviously the state of Michigan and everything Jeff Barnes is doing. they want to align with you. What's your advice to them? How can they most effectively support what you're doing or help you open doors? Seth, you want to start?
Yeah, I'm gonna start. I think I laid out earlier the pillars that I think are important for a comprehensive approach. I think I'm pleased to hear that a lot of other companies are doing it. Some of the stuff that Jeff mentioned earlier in terms of helping veterans translate their skills, both for employers and for themselves to understand what's out there. Helping veterans enhance their skills through education institutions, apprenticeships, other types of programs, and then helping them match. That's really what we're trying to do with Get Skills to Work. I'd encourage other independent programs to try a similar approach. And look, we're trying to build a big tent here. GE, we have a lot of employees. We only have, I guess, about 1/10 of what you have in the U.S. at Walmart. But and so we can take a bite out of this problem ourselves. But we see ourselves as working as a convening authority here in industry and bring in some other big convening authorities like Boeing, Alcoa, Lockheed Martin, some of the other organizations that we're part of, and we'd love to have other groups join the Get Skills to Work coalition. So I'd encourage you to take part in that. In fact, we're launching our first statewide partnership with Illinois in the coming weeks here. So I'd love to see as much as we can in Michigan as well.
Cool. I think we're kind of running short. This is just a terrific panel. Thank you so much. A year ago, Detroit Public Television took a deep dive, led by our former board chair, around our values and kind of reaffirming our values as an organization: trust, achievement, growth, teamwork, respect, creativity, and respect. And what we found was the more we dug into our values and displayed to the staff, the more we moved forward. It seems to me that everything about the Veterans Initiative, everything about this, for every company in the state of Michigan, this is a chance to sort of double down. Our veterans are very values-driven folks. And so everything we're trying to say to our employees maybe gets amplified a little more when we see it through the lens of the veterans and military issues that we're facing as a state. So thanks for your service, and thanks for great time.
Thank you.